We have some big news. The United States and the European Union have reached a trade deal. President Donald Trump and EU chief Ursula von der Leyen agreed to a 15% tariff deal. This deal stopped a trade war and created a trade framework worth $1.3 trillion. Trump called it the biggest deal ever. In just 3 weeks, he made deals with the EU, Japan, and the UK. But one country said no. That country is Canada, America's biggest trading partner. The EU accepted a 15% tariff deal in exchange for $750 billion in U.S. energy and $600 billion in investments. Canada walked away. No agreement. No press conference. Now Trump is threatening to hit Canadian imports with a 35% tariff starting August 1st. But Canada isn't rushing to sign a deal. Instead, Prime Minister Carney is playing a long game. Behind the scenes, Canada is building new shipping routes and energy corridors. It's also expanding its presence in the Arctic. These moves could outlast Trump's term and reduce America's control over trade routes. This is not just a standoff. It's a showdown between Trump's deal-making pressure and Canada's plan to build strength from within. So why did Carney refuse when the EU gave in? The answer is strategy. On July 27, 2025, Trump signed his deal with the EU at Turnberry. Instead of the 30% tariff he had threatened, he settled for 15%. That still hit Europe hard. Before June 2025, the average tariff was just 2.5%. Now it's 15% on about 70% of European goods going into the US. Europe agreed because they wanted to avoid something worse. They promised to buy more American energy, tech, and defense products. They gave in to keep peace with Washington. But Canada did not. Carney refused to follow the same path. He rejected the framework and protected Canada's supply chains. This shocked U.S. negotiators who expected Canada to fold. Now Washington sees Carney as more than just an ally. They see him as a strong opponent. The risk for America is clear. If Canada's refusal becomes an example for other countries, U.S. tariff threats will lose power. The same tactic may no longer work. In short, the EU agreed to Trump's 15% framework. Canada refused. America is surprised. And that's the real headline. Canada's stand is bold. Instead of rushing into a deal, Ottawa made it clear it will only accept a fair and stable agreement. The government said they won't bow to artificial deadlines. They are protecting long-term interests, not chasing short-term relief. Canada's provinces are now working with the federal government to defend key industries. This shows a united national response. The story is still developing, but one thing is clear: Canada has chosen patience and strength over pressure and fear. Canada decided to protect its own supply chain instead of depending on U.S. imports. By July 1st, the government started removing internal trade barriers, a move expected to lower costs by up to 15% and raise productivity by 4 to 8%. Provinces like Alberta, Ontario, and British Columbia made plans to protect key industries such as auto parts, steel, aluminum, and forestry. The strategy was simple: strengthen local supply chains instead of giving in to U.S. demands. Canada refused to fall into Trump's deal trap. It did not agree to buy massive amounts of U.S. energy or promise huge investments just to lower tariffs. Instead, Canada focused on resilience and supply security at home. But the stakes are high. If U.S. tariffs reach 35% on key sectors, the costs will spread across North America. Carney's refusal is more than defiance. It's a bet on Canada's independence and sovereignty. Then, Trump made comments that gave Canada an unexpected advantage in the media. Around July 25, 2025, Trump admitted, "We haven't been focused on a trade deal with Canada. It's not really a negotiation." He even suggested that Canada might just end up paying tariffs instead of making a deal. Meanwhile, U.S. officials were still calling the talks constructive. This contradiction leaked to the press and damaged Washington's credibility. Canada quickly used this gap. Ottawa framed the talks as one-sided and said if negotiations failed, it was the U.S. at fault, not Canada. Carney's team repeated that Canada had always supported fair talks, but Washington's mixed messages were the real problem. The media picked up on this. Reports in The Guardian and The Washington Post argued that Trump's unclear messaging weakened America's position and made Canada look like a reasonable partner. By late July, the Canadian dollar dropped slightly, but Ottawa used this to stress its calm and steady approach. The narrative shifted. Canada was no longer seen as the stubborn country resisting tariffs but as the careful partner asking for structure and stability. Trump's own words had flipped the story. Instead of weakening Canada, they gave Ottawa the moral high ground and reduced the power of his 35% tariff threat. It became a case of poor messaging backfiring on the U.S. Meanwhile, Canada turned the tariff fight into an opportunity in the Arctic. In March 2025, Prime Minister Carney announced Bill C-5, a plan to strengthen Canada's presence in the north. The government approved over $6 billion Canadian dollars for Arctic infrastructure, sovereignty programs, and a new radar system built with Australia. By late June, the plan became law. Provinces began building ports, roads, and community energy projects. Ottawa even appointed its first Inuit ambassador and opened new consulates in Greenland and Anchorage to expand Arctic diplomacy. Instead of chasing short-term U.S. trade deals, Canada invested in long-term assets. The Arctic holds lithium, cobalt, and rare earth minerals that are essential for defense and clean technology. While the U.S. still depends on China for about 70% of its rare earth imports, Canada is working to control its own resources. By reclaiming supply chains and building infrastructure, Canada gained leverage in global markets and new strength in international diplomacy. Carney's investments also changed how people saw Canada. Instead of looking weak under U.S. pressure, Canada looked strong, prepared, and focused on the long term. The Arctic plan turned Trump's tariff threat into a mistake. While Washington kept talking about deals, Canada was building real pathways that strengthened its independence. Trump's trade war met Canada's calm strategy in the Arctic. It wasn't just resistance. It was a smart counterattack, using local industry, indigenous diplomacy, and resource control to reshape North American trade politics. By April 2025, as Trump demanded fast deals, Canada kept building at home. Ottawa invested more than $30 billion Canadian dollars over 4 years to strengthen sovereignty, rebuild industries, and protect supply chains. Instead of rushing like Europe or Japan, Canada chose to rewrite the rules. With Bill C-5, called the One Canadian Economy Act, Ottawa removed barriers between provinces and sped up infrastructure approvals. This gave structure and control, not panic. Provinces and Indigenous leaders could move at their own pace. What set Canada apart was strategy, not reaction. Where Trump pushed for quick deals, Canada built long-term resilience. Where Washington used tariffs as threats, Ottawa reduced dependence and boosted its own production. Canada also worked with local communities and provinces to protect key industries like autos, forestry, and critical minerals. They didn't agree to rushed investments just to dodge tariffs. They made it clear they would only sign when the deal made sense. This made Canada both strong in defense and ready for opportunities. If Washington comes back with a fair and clear offer, Ottawa is open to talk. But Canada will sign on its own terms, not under pressure. Trump thought a 35% tariff would make Canada give in. Instead, Canada stayed calm and silent. No fear. No retreat. Just patience. While the EU offered trillions in concessions, Canada chose a different path. Delay the deal. Secure the homeland. Build power quietly in the Arctic. Carney didn't sign under pressure. He set his own rules, on his own time, and on his own ground. Now, with no deal in place and tariffs looming, the leverage is no longer in Washington. It's in Ottawa. So, what happens next? Will Canada's patience push the US to finally negotiate seriously? Or will Trump raise the pressure and force a showdown? And what about the Arctic? Canada's control over rare earth minerals could shift the balance of power in North America. This is no longer just about trade. It's about who controls the game when the rules change. What do you think? Should Canada keep waiting for the right deal, or sign quickly to avoid bigger risks? Share your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes the quietest player ends up shaping the entire game.